21 properties, over 75 transactions, over $10 million in combined portfolio and transactional volume in my first 5 years, while I still had my corporate job. That's my side of it. Here's the other side. My company has funded over $2 million in real estate capital directly across clients, invoiced per approval as it lands, and every client who has gotten funded has paid. I am not a guru who talks about using other people's money. I am the other people's money, and I've been the operator asking for the yes. I've been the one deciding who gets it. Today, I'm opening the file on what exactly decides that yes, and it is not the number people assume. The vantage point nobody else has. Here's why you should sit through this instead of the next generic fundability video. I don't just talk about what lenders want in the abstract. 9 settlement statements on file, real closing documents showing over $432,000 in documented cash received at closings on my own deals. My own file has been read and cleared that many times, and many more. So when I tell you what a lender is actually reading, I'm not repeating something I heard secondhand. I'm telling you what's worked on my own paperwork and what I look for on somebody else's before my company will put money behind it. This is step 1 of the method I use. Get capital ready, buy right, recycle the capital. Today is entirely about step 1, being fundable. Before a single dollar of your own cash ever enters the conversation, picture 2 buyers walking into the exact same closing with the exact same cash in hand. I want you to hold that picture because by the end of this video, you'll know exactly why they don't walk out with the same offer. There's a specific order a lender reads your file in, 3 stops. And at the number most people spend years building, their bank balance is the last stop, if it gets read as a real factor at all. Today, I'm naming all 3 stops in order and showing you what exactly has to be sitting behind each one before a lender takes you seriously. Here's what we're covering. First, why a lender would ever open your entity documents before your bank statement. And I'll walk you through the exact underwriting logic, not just the claim. Second, why fundability is really 3 separate things that behave nothing alike. And treating them as one is exactly how smart people build the wrong one. Third, the same person, me, before I had a real file and after I built one. So you can see what specifically changed, not just that something I did. Fourth, why this trips up people who are good at almost everything else with money. Fifth, 3 questions you can run against your own file today before you ever talk to me. Then I'm walking my own file, start to finish, the real one, original story and all, and I'll close with where this breaks, because it does break, and anyone who tells you a file guarantees an approval is lying to you. I'm not going to tell you the order matters and expect you to take my word for it. I'm going to walk you through the actual logic an underwriter is running and let you see why the order has to be this way. An underwriter's first job isn't deciding if you're a good person with good intentions. It's deciding what they're actually lending against. If you show up as an individual, the loan is a bet on one's personal income continuing exactly as it is with no legal structure standing between the property and the rest of your life. If you show up as a properly formed and used entity, the loan is a bet on a business, one with its own documents, its own accountability, its own paper trail. That's why entity documents get opened first. It's not a formality. It's the underwriter figuring out what kind of bet this even is before they read another page. Second, stop, the credit file. Here's what people get wrong about this one. They think credit score is the point. It isn't. An underwriter reading a credit file is looking for a pattern. Whether debt gets carried and paid on purpose, on a schedule, over time, or whether it just accumulates and gets managed reactively. A high score built by accident and a high score built on purpose can look identical on the surface number and read completely different in the file underneath it. Third is income, the bank balance, the thing most people spend all their energy on. By the time an underwriter gets here, they already formed an opinion about what kind of borrower you are from the first 2 stops. Income tells them if the math works. It was never going to tell them on its own whether you're a kind of operator they want to be in business with. That's the order: entity, credit, income. Not because I said so, because of what each one is actually built to prove. Here's what people flatten 3 different things into one word: fundable, when it's actually three separate parts of a file that move on three completely different timelines and get built three completely different ways. The entity is a legal fact. It exists or it doesn't, and building it correctly, formed the right way, in the right state, used like a business from day one instead of a name on a page, is something you can finish in weeks, sometimes even days. The credit file is a behavior pattern. It's not the fact you file once. It's a track record that accumulates over months and years, on purpose or by accident. You can start building it deliberately, starting today, but you can't backdate a pattern. The paperwork, the packaging, it's a presentation. It's how the entity and the credit file actually get assembled and handled to a lender in a form that reads like you've done this before, even on deal one. That's a skill, not a fact, not a track record. And it's the piece most people never had to build because nobody ever taught them the format a lender is expecting to see. Three different things. A legal fact, you can finish fast. A pattern you can only start building today and let compound. A presentation skill you can learn directly. Calling all three being fundable and treating them like one task is exactly why people either freeze, thinking all has to happen at once, or build the wrong one first and wonder why it didn't move the needle. I want to show you the real difference this made. Not a hypothetical, my own file at 2 points in time. Before I understood any of this, my file was the file most people show up with. Personal credit decent, built by paying my bills on time, but never assembled with a lender's read order in mind. No entity structured specifically to hold and operate property, paperwork that existed technically, but it wasn't packaged. It was just whatever documents happened to be lying around when someone asked for them. After everything about the file changed except the person holding it, the entity got formed and used correctly on purpose before it needed to prove anything. The credit profile kept building, but now on a schedule. I was actually watching, not just hoping it stayed clean. And the paperwork got assembled the way a lender actually wants to receive it, in an order they're going to read it before they ever act. Same income roughly, same person, same discipline, honestly. I wasn't more disciplined after than before. The only thing that changed was that the file went from something that existed to something that was built on purpose, with intention, in the order a lender actually reads it. That's the entire shift, and it's the difference between a file that gets a slow no and one that gets read as a pattern. Here's the part that took me a while to actually see clearly. Even after I lived through it myself. I ran a $25 million market P&L at my corporate job, so I sat on exactly the side of the desk where a big number is the entire proof. In that seat, the number on the P&L was the credibility, full stop. Nobody asked to see the structure behind it. The structure was assumed because somebody else's finance department had already built it before the number ever reached me. Bring that instinct home to your own personal file, and it quietly misleads you. You start believing that the number is the proof, so you stack cash, you watch your balance, and you feel more fundable every time it goes up, because that's the exact instinct that's worked for you everywhere else. But a lender evaluating you personally isn't reading a P&L somebody else already structured. They're reading whatever you built yourself. And if the honest answer is nothing, structured on purpose, the balance in the account doesn't change what the first two stops in that file are going to show them. I hear a version of the same instinct constantly. I can't afford the deal. I can't afford to be wrong with our money. That's not caution getting in the way. That's exactly the right instinct, pointed at the wrong lever. Being careful with the money was never the risk. Assuming the balance was doing the proving, while the entity in the credit pattern set unbuilt was. You don't need to talk to me to run this one. Pull up your own file right now. Ask the three questions in the same order a lender would. First, does the entity, if you have one, have its own bank account? Used like a business actually uses one? Or does everything still run through a personal account with the entity's name attached after the fact? Second, has the entity filed its own business tax return? Something that shows it as an operating entity, not just a certificate in the drawer. Third, is there any documented transaction history under the entity at all? Anything a lender could point to and say, this has been operating. If any of those three answers is no, that's not a failure, it's just information. It tells you exactly which of the first two stops in the file isn't built yet, and it costs you nothing to find out. Most people have never once asked these 3 questions about their own file before assuming the number in their account was the whole story. So let me walk you through where my own file actually started, because the honest version includes the part before there was a file worth reading at all. It started with a decision, not a document. I sold my 25 square foot family home, moved my family into a house half its size to free up roughly $80,000. That funded my first properties. I ran out of money at 3 or 4 doors, the way every saver eventually does. And that's the exact moment I learned the constraint, which was never the cash, it was whether a lender would say yes to me as an operator. That's when the real file building started. Not because I read a book about it, because I had no other option left. The entity got formed and used the way I described on purpose. The credit pattern kept building on a schedule. I started actually watching. And I had to learn the hard way what paperwork a lender actually wanted to see and in what order, instead of showing up with whatever I had. Here's the proof it worked. Not a claim, paper. 9 settlement statements, over $432,000 in documented cash received at closings across sales and refinances for a few properties. On a file that started with nothing but a decision to downsize and a lender's yes. I had to earn 1 file at a time. And the other side of the desk now, over $2 million in real capital my own company has funded directly across clients. Invoice per approval, every one of them paid. That's not a coincidence. Both sides of that number exist because the file, not the bank balance, was the thing that had to be built first. Building a file does not guarantee an approval. It gets your file read as a pattern instead of a guess. And the pattern still has to be a good one. Real income that supports the loan, real credit history, a deal that actually underwrites. A perfectly built file behind a bad deal is still a no. The file removes the wrong reasons for a no. It does not remove the right ones. This also isn't instant. The entity can be formed in days or weeks. The credit pattern cannot be backdated. It only starts compounding from whenever you actually start building it on purpose. So the earlier you start the part you can't rush, the sooner the part you can rush catches up to it. And I'll say this honestly, because this part of the real cost of doing this alone. Nobody hands you the order, lenders actually read the file in. You either learn it by getting a string of slow no's and trying to reverse engineer why, which is what happened to me, or somebody who sat on both sides of the desk tells you the order up front. Figuring it out alone is not impossible. It's just slower and more expensive in time than it needs to be. And time is one thing compounding credit patterns can't get back for you. Near the top, the promise was hold the picture of 2 buyers with identical cash. And by the end, you'll know exactly why they don't get the same offer. At the close, call back to it directly. He now knows the 3-stop order and knows the balance was never the first or second stop. If that landed, say so plainly. The video just moved the belief it promised to move. Review your own Secretary of State website, where entity formation requirements, cost, and processing time are all publicly posted. Tell them to look up exactly what forming and maintaining their own entity actually requires and where you live, since that's public information, not a claim. So here's where this leaves you. The bank balance was never nothing. It still has to support the numbers. But it was never the thing deciding whether you got read as an operator or a stranger with a paycheck. Entity, credit, paperwork. In that order is the thing deciding, and every piece of it is buildable starting now. What we didn't cover today is what this exact file looked like for 2 people who started from opposite ends of zero and one who had never bought a single door. One who bought no cash to closing at all, both funded for the same underlying reasons. That's the next video.